dam located at a point south 1,087 feet east, 10,020 feet from the north quarter, section 15, township 2 north, range 22 east, Salt Lake Basin Meridian. The hereafter planned diversion is the same, but adding a point of rediversion on the Colorado River from a proposed Lake Powell pump station located at south 22,479 feet, west 73 feet from the southeast corner of section 5, township 44 south, range 4 east, Salt Lake Basin Meridian. The proposed use is for municipal uses within the service areas of King County Water Conservancy District and Washington County Water Conservancy District. There is a proposed maximum storage of 50,000 acre feet in Sand Hollow Reservoir, located in all or portions of sections 19 and 30, township 42 south, range 13 west, Salt Lake Basin Meridian, and sections 13, 24, 25, 26, township 42 south, range 14 west, Salt Lake Basin Meridian. The application has been protested by Marjorie Ploy, Eric Balkin, care of Glen Canyon Institute, Jane Whalen, care of Conservancy Southwest Utah, Center for Biological Diversity, Living Rivers, and Colorado Riverkeeper et al., and the Utah Rivers Council. So now let's give some general instructions, again, specific to this hearing. So we did receive, the state engineer's office did receive some additional information recently over the past few days. Due to the last minute nature of the submittal, the state engineer will extend the period of time for the applicants to respond for an additional 60 days, which ends on a Sunday, so 61 days, which will be December 21st, 2020. As delineated in the notice, the purpose of this hearing is really to provide parties with the opportunity to bring attention to the state engineer's attention information that they think is pertinent or relevant to the statutory criteria and the approval criteria for application, specifically in this case, a change application. This is a change application it's based on a previously approved application to appropriate. Consequently, it's strongly recommended that the parties testing 1, 2. Can you guys hear me now? It looks like my mic went dead. All right, we got a thumbs up. I don't know how much of that you missed. It was some real poetry, but I think we can forego me repeating all of that. In essence, the bottom line is if the applicants and protestants would direct their efforts towards the elements in the change application that are being proposed to be changed, namely the addition of the point of rediversion, the change in nature of use, the change in place of use, and the proposed storage in Sand Hollow Reservoir. Those are the elements that would be are critical to the state engineer as we evaluate that. Not to say that other elements are, but those are some of the things we would hope to hear more about. All right, with that, we'll now turn to the applicants and allow them to make their appearance.
Martin Bushman, Utah Attorney General's Office, here on behalf of the Utah Board of Water Resources.
Wendy Crowder, representing the Washington County Water Conservancy District. Also with me today in the room is Zach Renstrom, General Manager of the Washington County Water Conservancy District. And we do have additional parties, staff in the district represented on the Zoom call.
Thank you, Ms. Crowder.
And John Mabey on behalf of the Kane County Water Conservancy District.
Thank you, Mr. Mabey. Rather than going to the protestants to make their appearance, we'll allow the applicants to make their presentation, and we'll move to from that point.
Thank you. For the record, this is Wendy Crowther with the Washington County Water Conservancy District. We have prepared a joint presentation for the applicants. I will start by addressing the change application itself and the statutory criteria for approval. Mr. Bushman will then address the Board of Water Resources water right. Josh Cowden from Stantec will be joining us to talk about the project itself, as will Mr. Renstrom from Washington County Water Conservancy District. So change application A45638. This change application modifies an existing water right. As we've noted, it's water right number 413479. This was a portion of application to appropriate A30414. This is section D of that application to appropriate. This right represents a portion of Utah's Colorado River Compact allocation. The right was originally approved for appropriation for a large-scale public water supply project within the state of Utah. The change application seeks to change the intended use of this from the original Central Utah project to the proposed Lake Powell pipeline project use. It still will be used for a large-scale public water supply project within the state of Utah. The change seeks to add a point of rediversion at Lake Powell in order to use the water for the new project. It seeks to change the place of use to the service areas of the Washington County Water Conservancy District and the Kane County Water Conservancy District. It seeks to change the use to municipal. This is a reflection of the changes in the rules since its application was originally appropriated, allowing a public water supplier to hold a municipal right. We are also adding the option of storage in Sand Hollow Reservoir. We want to focus on the statutory criteria for approval of the change application. Under 7333, a person entitled to the use of water may make a change to an existing right. In this case, the Board of Water Resources is the holder of the existing water right 413479 and entitled to make the change. The change may be made if it does not impair an existing water right and if it is proved consistent with the requirements of section 7338 of the code. Under 7338, it is the duty of the state engineer to approve an application if there is reason to believe that it meets the listed criteria. You'll see here that there are 6 criteria for an application under 7338. However, criteria 1 applies specifically to an application to appropriate. That criteria that there is unappropriated water from the proposed source does not apply to a pending application because this is an application for a permanent change and not an application to appropriate. Likewise, criteria 6 applies only when there is an adopted groundwater management plan. It does not apply in this instance because there is no groundwater management plan. So, the criteria relevant to this application today, it shall be the duty of the state engineer to approve an application if there is reason to believe the proposed use will not impair existing rights or interfere with more beneficial use of water. The proposed plan is physically and economically feasible and will not be detrimental to the public welfare. The applicant has the financial ability to complete the proposed work. The application was filed in good faith and not for purposes of speculation or monopoly. The proposed use will not impair existing rights. Water Right 413479 is based on an approved application to appropriate. It currently allows water to be diverted from the Green River for the construction of a large-scale public water supply project. The proposed use continues to be to divert water from the Green River for the public water supply project. The application has been limited to the allowed depletion under the right to be taken out of Lake Powell, and there will be no expansion of the approved water right. Protestants have not identified any water right that may be impaired by the proposed change. And in fact, protestants do not own any water rights that may be impaired by approval of the application. As noted, this water right represents a portion of Utah's Colorado Compact application. The state of Utah has the right to develop and use its allocation on a co-equal priority basis with all other states. The compact allows the development of water of each state's application. And there will be no call on this water right outside of its priority, so priority water rights will not be impaired. This use will not prove detrimental to the public welfare.
Ms. Crowther,
Yes.
before you move on to your next point, so although the protestants did not identify a specific water right, they did mention the Central Utah project. Would you mind
Absolutely.
elaborating on that?
Yes. So the Central Utah project, what the concern raised in the protest really had to do with the Bonneville unit section of that project and whether the Bonneville unit rights could possibly be impaired by this. This was an issue that actually has already been addressed between the state of Utah and the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. You will see that Central Utah Water Conservancy District nor the Bureau of Reclamation, the parties entitled to protect that water right, protested this. In fact, there was an agreement entered into on May 6, 2011, that creates a priority for the Central Utah water if it can be mitigated by a reduction in the use of the LPP water right, and it can be shown that the LPP diversion will protect the Bonneville unit rights. So in effect, there is a limited subordination agreement between these two water rights, and should Central Utah come forth and be able to show that it is being harmed by this right, that ceasing to use the Lake Powell water right will actually help the Central Utah water right. The Central Utah water right will have the priority. The next point we were going to discuss is detrimental to the public welfare. The proposed use, as I noted, is a public water project intended to serve the needs of the public. It is, in fact, a benefit to the public. I would also note that the Lake Powell pipeline project is subject to very significant state and federal oversight. This project goes through a lot of approval process, and that approval process, particularly the NEPA review of this, is actually intended to protect the public welfare. So we do have a showing, even outside of this hearing, that the right will not prove detrimental to the public welfare. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bushman to address the water right itself.
Sorry, before you do that, you mentioned that it's your view that the NEPA process somehow addresses the public welfare clause. Can you expound on that, please?
Absolutely. Actually, I would turn the panel's attention to a recent fairly recent Utah Court of Appeals case, referred to as Hill, Utah versus Kane County Water Conservancy District. The site on that is 378 P3 1246. That case was a Court of Appeals case reviewing a district court decision to approve a change application on de novo review. So in that instance, basically the district court is sitting as the state engineer and making a determination on the change application, just as you are today. The proposed change there was to provide water to support the construction of a nuclear power plant. One of the points at issue was whether there was reason to believe the application would not prove detrimental to the public welfare. In approving that application, the district court relied on the fact that that project had to undergo comprehensive licensing, safety reviews, environmental reviews, and also in that case, financial audits. And that, as the fact that the project had to undergo these extensive reviews, the purpose of those reviews was to show that the plan would not harm the public, it would not be detrimental to the public. The district court judge relied on that fact that there were all of these other reviews of this that showed it was not going to be detrimental to the public, that it could not be permitted if it was actually going to be detrimental to the public or the environment, and relied on that as to believe that it would not harm the public welfare. The same is true here. This project, like I say, has been, and will continue to be subject to significant reviews. Most importantly, the environmental review, the environmental impact statement done on this, that is intended to protect the environment and the public, which, like I say, in effect, the Court of Appeals has said that the decision maker in your position can rely on the fact that outside entities are doing significant reviews to make sure this project will not prove detrimental, as a showing and a reason to believe that it will not be detrimental.
Thank you.
Martin Bushman, again, Utah Attorney General's Office for the Board of Water Resources. What I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a history or background to the water rights that are part of this change application. On November 6, 1959, the Bureau of Reclamation obtained a Utah water right 41-2963 for 3,960,000 acre feet as part of its Colorado River project. This right carried a August 7th, 1958 priority date. A portion of that right was set aside by the reclamation for the ultimate phase of the Central Utah project. The ultimate phase comprised large-scale water development projects in Central Utah. However, the ultimate phase was ultimately defunded by Congress in 1992, which left the Bureau of Reclamation with water that it originally set aside for that project and no longer had a basis to put it to beneficial use. So in 1996, Reclamation segregated water right 41-2963 and assigned 158,890 acre feet of depletion and 447,500 acre feet of diversion to the Utah Board of Water Resources. And that water right is what's before us today, or is the water right that's subject to the change, is water right 41-3479. Now, this right is an approved water right application held by the Board of Water Resources, and it's part of Utah's upper Colorado River Basin apportionment. The change application proposes a portion of this water right, 83,756.14 acre feet of depletion, be approved for use in the Lake Powell pipeline project, which is a large-scale water development project. Now, a little bit of the understanding between the Bureau of Reclamation and the state as it relates to this particular water use that's being proposed in the change application. And a little history is helpful with it as well. Water apportioned to Utah by the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact may be developed and diverted from the Green River and its tributaries. That's Utah's right to do that. Now, the Bureau of Reclamation is also required to maintain minimum flows in the Green River below Flaming Gorge Dam for endangered fish species. And to the extent that Utah could continue to divert waters or develop waters in the tributaries, that it potentially then could interfere with those flows, those regulated flows going down the Green River and the minimum flows for the endangered fish. So Reclamation and the state entered into what is a proposed exchange agreement at this point. It will be finalized and signed once a record of decision is issued on the project. But that agreement ensures that the water used for the Lake Powell pipeline project from water right 41-3479 remains in the Green River after release from Flaming Gorge until its rediversion at Lake Powell. Now, this agreement basically exchanges, and it's unlike probably most exchange agreements that you might be familiar with, but it's exchanging Utah's right to divert out of tributaries in the Green River for the right for system water released from Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Now, this is not stored water. These are releases from Flaming Gorge Reservoir that the Bureau of Reclamation is already doing. Through this agreement, this helps the Bureau of Reclamation maintain flows in the Colorado. Now, it's important to note that neither the exchange agreement nor this change application will alter or affect in any way releases from Flaming Gorge Reservoir as prescribed in the 2006 Record of Decision, nor will it diminish minimum Green River flows required for endangered fish. The project water comes from existing reclamation releases and flows for endangered fish in the Green River, and it's not diverted until after that water has served its Endangered Species Act purpose of helping the endangered fish. By way of the project, this is a project that was authorized and directed by the Utah legislature in the Lake Powell Pipeline Development Act in 2006. The act directs the Board of Water Resources to construct the project as funded by the legislature. This is a state project. It is funded by the state of Utah. And the board, through the Division of Water Resources in Washington County Water Conservancy District, has designed and is pursuing completion of the project. Now, for a little more detail about the project, its structures and technical aspects, Josh Cowden, who's a project engineer for the Lake Powell Pipeline, will provide information to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond.
Good afternoon. Is that better? Good afternoon. This is Josh Cowden with Stantec, consultant for the Utah Board of Water Resources. I will be giving a brief overview of the technical overview of the project itself. The project has many components, one of which is the exchange contract and point of rediversion, which has already been discussed. The physical components of the project are the water intake system at Lake Powell, the pipeline itself, and various booster pump stations, high point regulation tank, and inline hydro stations. And we'll be walking through those components. As mentioned, the project would require a point of rediversion. This map shows, looks like it was cut off a little bit, but the point of diversion currently is at Flaming Gorge Reservoir below the dam. And the point of rediversion would be at Lake Powell. And this map just shows the relation of those 2 points. The water intake system. So the water intake system is currently proposed near Glen Canyon Dam, just upstream. Its current design consists of 6 submerged 6-foot diameter horizontal tunnels that would act as intakes. That would be used to bring the water to a pump station. Current design of the pump station is a 2,000 square foot building that would sit up on top of the rim of the reservoir. Currently design includes 6 vertical turbine pumps, 300 horsepower each. Operation plan would be to have 4 of those units in operation with 1 for standby. To power the pumps, they would be powered by electric motors. There's a proposed half-mile 69 kV transmission line that would come from the existing Glen Canyon substation. There would have to be some minor upgrades to that substation. And then there's various other facilities associated with the intake system, buried surge tanks, a flow meter, and access roads and parking areas. This is just an aerial view of the intake station itself in relation to Glen Canyon Dam. You'll note that the area has already been previously disturbed for construction and staging of Glen Canyon. The intake station would sit upon that previously disturbed area. A closer view, aerial view of the intake station shows some of the topography. You'll note that the existing topography does screen the intake station from visitors that would be recreating in the area, for example, the Waheap area or the dam itself. This schematic just shows a plan view. I know this is not to scale, but just to kind of give you an idea of how the intake station would work. I mentioned 6 horizontal tunnels. You can see 3 of them here. The other 3 are in parallel behind. The intakes would have 3 elevations to take advantage of whatever the elevation of the reservoir is at. the intake or lateral intake tunnels then would deposit the water in a vertical shaft, which is then routed to a 4-bay connection tunnel into a single 4-bay chamber itself. The 4-bay chamber sits directly below the intake station, in which the 6 pumps would then pump that water up out of the 4-bay via 6 well shafts.
Mr. Cowan, a question with regard to this intake structure. Do you have a kind of a range of cubic feet per second at, assuming that all intake tunnels are submerged versus at the low level? You have 2 operating levels or 3 operating levels here, but you the upper tunnel operation level and the lower tunnel operation level. Do you have a span of maximum flow rates you can recall?
The current design is to have those pumps be variable and to be able to take advantage of whatever the elevation is at. The current design of the intake and the pipeline itself is to be at a 144 CFS. I don't have the maximum at hand, but the design is to
that's
have
the design flow is
that's the design flow
144
144 CFS or roughly 93 MGD. And that's under an assumption of 350-day operation with a 15-day period of maintenance each year. This is just the mechanical section view of the underground work and the powerhouse itself, similar to what we saw before, the 3 intakes, 2 tunnels each at each elevation, depositing the water into the 4-bay, which would then be pumped up to the powerhouse itself and deposited into the pipeline for delivery to Sand Hollow. The elevation of the pipeline coming out of the pump station is a little over 3,700 feet. Pumping head would obviously be dictated by the elevation of the reservoir itself. The pipeline is roughly 140 miles long. It is a buried 69-inch diameter steel pipe with various appurtenances for draining and controlling the air in the pipeline itself. The first 51 miles of the pipeline is from the water intake system. Is where we pump the water uphill. We often call this the uphill run. It goes to the high point regulating tank, which is the topographic high point of the pipeline. And it's roughly 2,000 feet of lift to that regulating tank. After it gets to the regulating tank, we have about 90 miles of downhill run or gravity flow to control the head. In that section of the pipeline, we have 6 inline hydro stations to break the head along that route. As mentioned, the design flow is 144 cubic feet. Maximum flow velocity in the pipelines in the design criteria is 5.5 feet per second. Part of the pipeline would also include a turnout in King County for potential future connection.
Mr. Cowan, do you know, or maybe this is best answered by King County Water Conservancy District, with that potential turnout, whether that's connected to some type of reservoir intended for storage of that turnout? Or maybe
it is currently not connected to storage. King County, when they were part of the environmental impact statement process, they have since withdrawn from that process, but they are still a participant in this water right. There was going to be roughly 8-mile lateral that would go to a proposed treatment plant that they had. And that was roughly in the Johnson Canyon area.
Thank you.
This map just shows the overall route of the pipeline itself. There have been many routes analyzed, discussed, proposed over the many years. In terms of feasibility of the route chosen, it offers the best balance of cost and also in terms of constraints. Many of the routes were dropped from consideration because of hydraulic constraints, geological constraints, and also the desire to avoid obviously wilderness areas, national parks, things like that. On the eastern side of the pipeline, as mentioned, this is where we have the 4 booster pump stations that would lift the water to the high point reg tank. The alignment for this portion of the pipeline predominantly follows the existing US Highway 89 into Utah. Various transmission lines would be constructed mostly along existing transmission lines and transmission line corridors to power those pump stations. I would note the black lines are existing transmission lines and the orange lines are proposed. The west side of the pipeline, this is the downhill run from the High Point Reg Tank. As mentioned, we have 6 inline hydro stations, HS1 through HS5, and then the terminal station at Sand Hollow. Not only do these break the head and save costs in terms of pipe thickness, but also it's an opportunity to recover some of the energy costs associated with the pumping of the water. And then the terminal point of the project would be the existing Sand Hollow Reservoir. In terms of the economic feasibility, the Bureau of Reclamation did an independent look at the economic feasibility of the project in their June 2020 draft environmental impact statement. They assessed the benefits, economic benefits of the project would range in terms of present value from 1.9 billion to 2.1 billion. And then the present value of the cost of constructing and operating the project would range between 1.9 and 2 billion. So the project cost equal benefits and is economically sound. And there's been various analyses in the draft impact statement and elsewhere, which I believe Washington County Water Conservancy District will discuss further. But assuming population growth go along the baseline Kempsey-Gardner projection, the community ability to pay is sufficient to pay the cost, and that was a conclusion of Reclamation's analysis. Turn the time now over to Zach Renstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Zachary Renstrom. I'm the general manager of the Washington County Water Conservancy District. We're the entity that is responsible to make sure that our community has drinking water and that the water is used in the most efficient, wise manner. Also, excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat. So with that responsibility, we can't just look out 5 or 10. We really need to look out at multiple generations. And we have done that. My board has looked at different options, and our board at Washington County Water Conservancy District has adopted a plan. And here on the presentation on the slide, this shows Washington County's Water Conservancy's plan to supply drinking water to our community. And as you can see from the pie chart, the Lake Powell pipeline is a critical component of ensuring that we have adequate water supply for our community, and we're taking care of our water, our community's needs. So one of the best ways to predict the future is to look at the history. And this shows the historic population growth of Washington County. And as you can see, we've had quite rapid growth in this area. We're one of the fastest growing communities in the nation quite often. There's various reasons for it, but most of all, people just find it a wonderful place to live, and they come there for various reasons. And that's why we've had that. But we're getting to the point where all these individuals are served by one water basin, that's the Virgin River Basin. And we've done a remarkable job managing that limited resource there by providing drinking water to our community, but also protecting the environment. We have endangered fish, we have birds, we have other animals that we have to watch out of. And so we have to consider that in our balancing of how we're going to most wisely use the Virgin River and benefit of that. So when we look at the history, though, and we see this rapid growth, the University of Utah and the Kempsey-Gardner Institute shows that Washington County is going to continue to grow. So this is not our numbers. This is not Washington County's numbers. These are from the state of Utah and the governor's office and the University of Utah. And they're going to show that we're going to continue to grow at a very rapid pace. Now, as the individual that's responsible for ensuring that these individuals will be able to come to my community and that we're going to be able to provide them safe, reliable drinking water, this is one of the reasons why it makes the Lake Powell pipeline so crucial. Is we've got to get this water somewhere, and that is the Colorado River has been shown to be the most reliable water source in the Western United States. The Virgin River Basin, it's a very small basin. We'll go from 1 year where it's a flood event where we're literally washing homes down the river to the very next year we'll have an extreme drought. And we've seen that recently. In the last 20 years, we've been in a drought phase for 16 of those. And as the person responsible for ensuring that I have a reliable water source, that every single day there's drinking water, we need to expand our resources that we have now. So one thing that's quite unique about our community is we're very accommodating. We welcome people into our community. We invite people into our community, and we're glad. We live in an amazing place down there, and we want to share that with others. So one of the things that the numbers I showed you before, that was the census numbers of people that count Washington County as a permanent residence. However, if anybody's ever been down to St. George over, let's say, Easter weekend or Thanksgiving or any other holiday, you can see that there's a lot more people there than just the citizens. And so the Kim C. Gardner Institute and the University of Utah, through the University of Utah, came out to look at, okay, how many people are there in Washington County on a typical day? And so they came out with their study, and they said approximately there's 26% more people in Washington County. And that's backed up by the fact that almost 20% of our homes are secondary homes. So these are individuals that have a home that will come and spend extensive time in our community, but yet they don't claim Washington County as a permanent resident. Now, even though these visitors might come and go, it's still my responsibility and the water district's responsibility that these people have clean, reliable drinking water and that their needs are taken care of. So why the Lake Powell pipeline? As I spoke earlier, the Virgin River Basin, we're coming to the limitations on what we can get out of that source. We've done a great job. We're continuing to monitor that, but we also need to protect the environment and make sure that the fish and the endangered species in that area are also protected. And when we start balancing all those equations, we simply need a second source of water. The second source of water would also give us a great benefit of if there's issues with the Virgin River. We've had events on the Virgin River where there's been large floods that come through, and when those large floods come through, they affect our water source down there. Also, if there's wildfires, that can also have great effect on the Virgin River Basin. And so having a second source that we can tap into just makes our system more reliable. When we look at the future growth and all those individuals that plan to come to our community, both to live there and our visitors, the Lake Powell pipeline and this water source will also allow us to meet those future needs. We're quite concerned about the costs. We spend a lot of time watching the costs, and we spend a lot of time looking at it. And when we look at it, the Lake Powell pipeline is an economically feasible project. The cost per acre foot is comparable to other projects of people trying to develop water in this area. The environmental responsibility, the construction of this will have very little effect on the actual construction. Will disturb the desert a little bit, but once the pipe's in the ground, species won't even know it's there. They'll walk right over this pipeline and not know it. And it'll also allow us to continue to put effort in protecting the Virgin River and the environment on the Virgin River. And what's nice is we're also, like I said, using an existing water right that the state of Utah has and utilizing their Utah state rights to use that Colorado River water.
Before you move on, Mr. Renstrom,
yeah,
you talked about the cost per acre foot, and I recognize that I'm interrupting a lot, and we'll add some more time for your presentation. Do you have a present day value of the cost per acre foot associated with the water from the Lake Powell pipeline?
So as I'm sitting here today, we're estimating around about $18,000 per acre foot.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to show this slide because I think this is a good example of what we look at the Virgin River. It's a beautiful river, and we've done a lot with it, but it is a desert stream that comes from a very, very small, limited water basin. Compared to where Lake Powell is, you look at the drainage area of Lake Powell, it's huge. It covers multiple states. And so if one particular area is, having a drought, another area might receive a little bit more snow. And so it just gives us a lot more redundancy in our system. Also, instead of constructing a new dam or something like that, we're tapping into an existing infrastructure that's already there, that's already had an effect upon the river. And so we're also utilize the resources that we already have here or within the Western United States and not have to build new dams or other projects like that. So like I said, these are the benefits. It creates a huge reliable source. As an individual that's responsible for this, I stay up nights thinking about this. And to have a tool in my toolbox to bring in additional water and give me that extra reliability is huge. Like I said, we have droughts a lot in southern Utah, and we have that huge variability. And to tap into this, it just gives us extra protection. Our economy is now growing very fastly. Our economy has been growing very fast in southern Utah. And what's nice is St. George is now becoming an economic engine for the state of Utah. And it continues to go that way. We have a lot of businesses that are looking to come into southern Utah that would have never considered St. George or Washington County 10, 20 years ago. But now they're seeing that the economies there are very vital. And then it's a growing community. And I think it's interesting is in this pandemic, our building permits are actually up quite a bit. We're actually seeing a lot more growth going on during these events in this last year, and it's growing very rapidly. So just to touch on the repayment. And so as mentioned earlier, the state of Utah, this is a state of Utah project. And the state of Utah essentially has the power to construct their own project. But one of the things that we looked at is how can the citizens of Washington County repay this? We have 3 revenue sources. First of all, your traditional rates. We do receive some funds through property tax, but we also receive a lot of funds through impact fees. So the idea is that the majority of this pipeline will be funded by impact fees. As people move into the community, they will have to pay those, and they're paying them now. What's nice about this too is this has been looked at not by one of my consultants or some of my staff. It was really, I think, beneficial that the Utah State Legislature auditors came in. These are individuals that are trained in this. They do this for their living, very talented individuals. And they have no skin in the game, essentially. They came in as independent individuals that get no benefit if the pipeline's built or not built. And they came in and looked at this, and they looked at different scenarios. And each one of those scenarios that came down, they realized that Washington County does have the ability to repay this, and it was economically feasible. And that was their finding. That wasn't my finding, or even one of my consultants. That was their finding. And like I said, it was very nice because they were a very non-biased group, that's our job to look at. So, okay, sorry about that. So just in conclusion, this water right application will not impair any other existing water rights out there. The project is economically feasible and physically feasible. We've had, like I said, multiple engineering firms looked at this. They've all said it was feasible. We've had multiple people look at the economies, and they said it also, separate of each other. The state of Utah clearly has the financial ability to complete the project, and Washington County has the ability to repay them. We believe this has been filed in very good faith, and that it's not based on speculation. We have a need for it. We have people moving to our community, and we desperately need that water. And so we're not speculating because we actually can show that going on. And what's nice too is that the state of Utah is a partner in this process. We both feel that this is a very good project and that you should approve the change application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renstrom. I did have one follow-on question, and maybe it's best directed at Kane County Water Conservancy District, so I'm not sure if Mr. Maybe wants to speak to this or not. There's some question as to what the true status of Kane County Water Conservancy District's status is on this application. And I think in my mind that may tie directly to the financial feasibility of the project. And so if you could at least provide some insights with regard to that, it'd be appreciated.
Kane County Water Conservancy District withdrew from the initial NEPA process. They are, however, still part of the project. They intend to stay involved, and as the As Mr. Cowan indicated, there will be a turnout constructed as part of the pipeline. And in the future, as the economics, or not the economics, but as the need for the water in the district might change, circumstances could change in terms of their existing water supplies, in terms of future growth that may occur. They are preserving the right to be able to use the project in the future. And as part of that, can hardly breathe with that. I forgot to take off my mask. As part of that, the Board of Water Resources has added Kane County Water Conservancy District as a place of use for the project water. This is not unusual. Any type of public water supply project of this nature is more inclusive for the project purposes rather than less inclusive. And so should the district decide they want to proceed and participate in the project, they will then have to follow and do their own NEPA and go through that process, and then connect to the Lake Powell pipeline.
So is it a safe assumption that the economic feasibility analysis of the Lake Powell pipeline omitted any revenues generated by Kane County Water Conservancy District up through 2060?
Yes, they did. I mean, the needs analysis was totally based on the demands and the growth related to Washington County. That water is needed by Washington County, but at the same time, should there be an opportunity for Kane County to participate, they would like to do so and make those arrangements as necessary.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the protestants, and let me pull out my list here. First on the list is Eric Balkin, Glen Canyon Institute. I'm not sure if he's present.
This is Dave Wegner, and I am
Mr. Balkin or anyone representative.
This is Dave Wegner. Can you hear me?
I see.
This is Dave Wegner.
Mr. Wagner, are you attempting to speak on behalf of the?
Yes, I am. Eric Balkin asked me to speak.
Hold on, Mr. Wagner. We're not hearing you, so stand by.
Mr. Hearing Officer, can we ask questions of the applicant?
So stand by if you're on Google Meets and you're attempting to voice your concern as a party. We're just going to resolve this as best we can. We're trying to get audio pumped into the auditorium here so everyone can hear your message. Right now, we can see you talking, but we don't hear you.
Do you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Paul, you'll give us the heads up when we're ready to roll.
Am I coming through?
Please stand by. David, we do hear your response in the video conference. We're trying to bridge you into the physical Anchor location. Please stand by.
Copy.
While they're resolving that, why don't I see we have at least two protestants in the room. So, but while they resolve that issue, we will circle back to the other parties who are participating online. So why don't we move ahead and invite Miss Whalen, who represents Conserve Southwest Utah. If you step forward and make your appearance, state your name, please. if you wouldn't mind speaking into the mic, so grab the mic. It's just, yeah, one of those, and then press the button so it goes green. That way everyone can hear you.
I'm Jane Whalen. I'm a board member for Conserve Southwest Utah from St. George. So we advocate for preservation of our natural and cultural resources by advocating for their preservation, education, and engagement. We were nominated by the governor in 2016 to work on water strategies for the state of Utah. We did that, and they're posted on the Envision Utah website, and it's under projects and water. One of their recommendations is to use our water more efficiently before we build this type of infrastructure. But this is kind of going in the other direction. It's kind of the cart before the horse here. So we don't think there's any water for the Lake Powell pipeline. And this is what my presentation is about. And then we don't think that it's appropriate right now to do the change application because it's not really clear the state of Utah has the right to transfer water from the upper basin to the lower basin, and it will take all the basin states to agree, plus the US Congress. So this could take many years to complete. So we just think it's too soon to try to do this application. So we suggest before they do the change application that they negotiate these agreements before they apply for a change application. So it's really is, there's some major problems here with trying to do this now. So with all these unresolved questions, and after we just heard today or yesterday that Senator Vickers said that the EIS record of decision wouldn't be done until 2022. And then talking with staff here today that the EIS will have to be totally redone. So we don't even know if this is a really viable project. So I submitted Science Be Damned by Eric Hune and John Fleck, because he describes in there how the river is over allocated, and that this really is happening because everybody thought that there were all these excess flows, surplus flows that everybody used. So back in 1922, it was a wet time and they thought there was 17 million acre feet in the system, so they could easily divide up 15 and there wouldn't be a problem. But that isn't happening. So then now the reservoirs are half full. So the whole idea of capturing this water to fulfill the lower basin agreements isn't happening, and it's already in shortage. So we really have this problem where, yes, Utah does have a paper water right, but we think it's just paper. It doesn't have a physical wet water with it. And so that's what we're talking about today. So this is a chart from the Bureau of Reclamation, and it shows the water supply in blue and then the use in red. And since 2002, there's been more use than supply. So we're already running in a deficit. So, and that's just going to continue. So that isn't going to change. So what they've said, it's a million acre feet less of water going into these reservoirs every year. So that's really draining these reservoirs. And the reason is, they say it's 50% of the decline is from temperature rise. So Utah is a hot spot. It's warming twice as fast as global climate. So that's another reason why, you know, there isn't water for the Lake Powell pipeline. So it's an interesting concept, buying water for the exchange from the Colorado River Storage Compact project, because the water really isn't there. And it's an interesting exchange. So Utah has to have water in their allocation to exchange with the Bureau of Reclamation, and we don't think that that's the case. The Colorado River Storage Project already is operating in a deficit, so it's hard to see why buying water from a project that's in deficit would be for a permanent water project that we all have to pay billions for and have to rely on. In reading over the contract for the water, it was interesting because just on the last page, it just says, well, we'll notify you if there's a shortage. So that's really no guarantee. There's really no guarantee. And we already know that the Colorado River Storage Project is already in deficit, and that the Lake Powell pipeline water right is a junior water right. So they have to have unappropriated water to be able to apply for this change application. We've tried for years to get this physical information on trying to show us if this water right exists for this exchange. We did a grandma request, and then they told us the records do not agree between the Division of Water Rights and the Division of Water Resources. So we suggest that the state engineer must have the applicants disclose what physical water are they using in this change application. Just telling us all the time that they have the paper water rights is not sufficient, because that water is no longer in the system. So during this new draft environmental impact statement on the Lake Powell pipeline that we just finished up with, they applied climate change reductions to the Virgin River, and then saying, well, that's why we need the Colorado River. But surprisingly, they didn't apply climate change science to the Colorado River. So we hired Ben Harding of Linker Technologies, who's an expert on climate modeling. And he found that the Lake Powell pipeline water right is not viable. It's not reliable. It really isn't there. It's subject to shortage. It's subject to a compact call. So it's really uncertain. So it's hard to have the state pay billions of dollars for a project with so many uncertainties. And that it was a surprise after years and years of commenting on the Lake Powell pipeline. We started in 2008, kept mentioning about climate and how it would reduce water availability, but that keeps getting to be ignored. So we're hoping in this next phase, if they're going to be doing the EIS all over again, that they consider climate change impacts on the water availability for the Lake Powell pipeline. So the other thing that on top of the over allocation of the Colorado River, so Utah's water rights seem to be in disarray. In 2014, there was an article in the Deseret News, Kent Jones, now retired state engineer, just explaining how paper water rights are very different from wet water rights, and that Utah claims we have 1.4 million acre feet of depletion, but the state has approved more than 2 million. And if you go to their Upper Basin website today, it's around 2.4 million acre feet. So before Utah keeps allocating more water, really need to resolve these things of over allocation before, because it's just going to create further litigation in the future. So Utah's allocation, it's not like it's permanent. It's only a percentage. So they're saying there's 361 acre feet left, but they're using the 15 million acre feet figure, again, counting on the surplus water that really isn't there any longer. So if there's really only about 12,000 million acre feet, and it's only a percentage, then that really pushes out water for the Lake Powell pipeline. So other states also, in state of Colorado, they still have water to develop as well. And Utah really just has, blinders on because it doesn't consider climate change reductions. Again, we did another grammar requests to get these specific water rights in use, and they really couldn't provide us with anything that's current. But we did find some other slides on the internet, and maybe Clark will do that fairly soon. So the Lake Powell pipeline water right is just conditional. So it's not fixed like everybody else. And then it really is junior. So again, if they're buying water from the Colorado River Storage Project, their senior water rights holders are the lower basin states, Mexico, and in the upper basin, we have the tribal water rights that are senior to the Lake Powell pipeline water right. And then we also have the Central Utah project, as was talked about previously, also has a senior water right. So if the Lake Powell pipeline just doesn't have sufficient priority for a permanent $2 billion water project. So Clark, if you could do that slide, this one. So this is what we found on the internet. It's the by the Division of Water Rights. It's the estimated depletions. So it's agriculture, municipal power, exports, reservation, reservoir evaporation, things like that. And then we looked into these numbers ourselves since we couldn't get something specific or an updated version. And we're using a lot more water than this chart shows. So if it's 1 million acre feet and we only have 300,000 left, and there's less water, and that the Native American tribes have priority over us with everybody else, it's really questionable that there's even a valid water right. It's okay. We'll go next then, Clark. Back. And so depleted water, which we've been talking about, is just not returned to the Colorado River. It's consumed by people, plants, and animals, and evaporation. So we hired an expert on water demand to take a look at what the was being proposed, and he concluded the plan for use of the Lake Powell pipeline water would be the least efficient in the U.S. Peter Mayer of Water Demand and Engineering firm. So he thought it was pretty arbitrary what they're trying to do, 15-year, and what they're, so in, when they first started the Lake Powell pipeline, at least at the Development Act, Lake Powell Pipeline Development Act, in 2006, the population projections were 860,000, and then still the same, they wanted the 86,000 acre feet of water. So now we're all these years later, and the population projections that are now down to 500,000, but they still want the same amount of acre feet. So that's why we think this is total speculation. So, and then what they're trying to do, so they added all these little things to try to increase demand. 15-year water reserve extends the population out 15 more years. 15.4 system loss when EPA recommends 10%. And then Peter Mayer thought that you don't want to have that much water loss in the system, and he estimated that it was $300 million worth of loss if you're going to have that loss continue on. You know, a water agency tries to solve that and reduce that, but there's and then also there was no water conservation at all after 2045, and then they tried to keep the gallons per person per day very high and no gain after 2048. So it was all just an effort to try to inflate demand for use. And so we think it's detrimental to the public welfare. So that, and right to this day, they're still kind of using tunnel vision not really looking at climate change, ignoring cheaper alternatives, really burdening us in the state with debt, not disclosing what water they're exchanging, and so on and so forth. So that's why we think this is total speculation. So an interesting story about Kane County. So many years
Ms.
ago.
Whalen, I will say you have 15 seconds left on your presentation time, but I'll afford you a minute or two to sum up if you'd like.
Okay, so the state engineer has the duty to investigate what is the physical water over the long term, and what's the senior rights to be able to use it. Oops. And then we don't feel that, and we feel that the application should be rejected because there's really no legally or hydraulically feasible way to get this water, lacks evidence that water is available, and due to the inclining supplies, Utah really doesn't have any remaining water to develop. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Whalen. When requested, looks like they got the Google Meet thing kind of figured out, but what we'll do is we'll go ahead and turn to the next protestant who's here with us in the room. I believe the Utah River Council, if you'd like to come forward and make your appearance and state your name and make your presentation, please.
Is it okay to remove my mask? I'm not sure what the pandemic etiquette is.
If it's up to you, yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Zachary Frankel. I am the founder and executive director of the Utah Rivers Council and a protestant of this water right. I also want to mention before I jump into my comments that we support the Center for Biological Diversity's paper submission trying to summarize its response to the applicant's refutation of this protest and believe it should be entered and considered into the record. So section 73.381A notes that the applicant should demonstrate if there is a reasonable, excuse me, let me get that language here. It shall be the duty of the state engineer to approve an application if there is a reason to believe that the proposed use will not impair existing rights or interfere with the more beneficial use of water. To support that claim, the applicant notes in their response that, quote unquote, the Utah Division of Water Resources has determined that Utah's apportionment is 1.369 million acre feet. We live in an era of climate change. PhD climate change scientists have published scores and scores and scores of peer-reviewed studies and other published works that demonstrate that climate change in the Colorado River Basin is real. They are calling this era a mega drought. A recent paper identified the fact that it has not been this dry and warm in the American Southwest, including the Colorado River Basin, for 500 years, since Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. This claim that the division has somehow, quote unquote, determined that there is 1.369 million acre feet of water in this system without any climate change studies, without any peer-reviewed documentation, with what appears to be a back-of-the-envelope calculation is hard for the public to accept, and it's not in the public interest. We respectfully ask this office to suspend the consideration of this water right until a peer-reviewed published study has been done by the Division of Water Resources, which has been subject to peer review. So not some study that they produce and only share with the applicants and don't let the public comment on, but an actual study that we, as members of the public, are allowed to read, review, and submit comments on. Because even as, I don't want to repeat Ms. Whalen's comments, but what is quite clear is that even a casual review of the water rights of the Colorado River Basin demonstrate there is no unappropriated water in the system. Specifically, the 2007 hydrologic determination by the Bureau of Reclamation noted there was 5.7 million acre feet of water in the upper basin, 5.7. Of course, we all know the 22 compact requires the upper basin to deliver 7.5 million acre feet to the lower basin. So if I add those two numbers together, 5.7 and 7.5, I get 13.2 million acre feet. That total amount of water available, according to the 2007 hydrologic determination by the Bureau, says it specifically does not include evaporation of the reservoirs. So that has to be added in as well. But if you add those numbers together, you get 13.2 million acre feet. How does that stack to a climate change drop in flows from increased air temperatures and reduced snowpacks? That's just a 12% decline in flows. 12%. The range of scores of studies demonstrate the drop in Colorado River flows can be anywhere from 10 to 30%. So a 20% reduction in flows is what most of the science and scientists seem to agree is a reasonable estimate. With a 20% reduction in flows, there is not enough water for the Lake Powell pipeline and the existing water uses inside Utah. Central Utah Project water rights holders, which is me, will be impacted. Members of the Utah public will be impacted with the approval of this water right, no matter how you look at it. If there's water to put in the Lake Powell pipeline, the only way that wet water can be put there is by taking it away from existing water rights holders inside Utah. If there is not water to put into the Lake Powell pipeline, but the pipeline is constructed and approved, that means that the unfortunate and unwitting residents of Washington County will be burdened by debt for the pipe and the construction therein, but will not have wet water available for their debt payments. So the applicant really needs to demonstrate there's wet water there. They can't just make a statement without supported science. The applicant makes a lot of hay with the 2019 legislative audit on the economic feasibility of the repayment for the Lake Powell pipeline debt. Unfortunately, they're skipping very relevant details of that audit. Most importantly, page 19 of the audit says a recession in the early years of repayment would be especially challenging on Washington County Water District's ability to make payments. That's right out of the first 20 pages. It clearly says a recession makes repayment difficult. And if anybody in this room is unaware that we're in a recession because of this pandemic, then I'd like to join you in that fantasy world. There is so much heartache and difficult economic circumstances that Utahns are waking up to today. The idea that we would be indebted as a state by billions of dollars in spending for a water project we don't need, for water that doesn't exist, how anybody thinks that would be in the public's interest is highly questionable. That audit found that water rates have to increase 357%. Is there anybody in this world that wants a 357% increase in water rates? Does that sound like it's in the public's interest, in the best interest of the public welfare? That 2019 audit, in making that 357% increase in rates, assumed there would not be an economic recession beginning in 2020, as we've observed. And it also used in elasticity of demand rate of just negative 0.25. The applicant has already indicated that the elasticity, which is the decline in water demand as a function of the increase in water rates, the applicant has already noted in testimonies to the Executive Water Finance that the elasticity of demand is negative 0.5, which means, for example, if water rates go up 100%, then demand would go down 50%, right? So, excuse me. The applicant noted in the environmental review that the water use in Washington County is 304 gallons per person per day. If water rates go up 357%, the elasticity of demand at negative 0.5, which is a very reasonable estimate, will decline to make the GPCD below 150. That's similar to the water use in Vegas and Tucson and Phoenix and Los Angeles, other communities in the American Southwest. Yet the applicant has failed to address these impacts. It is extremely likely that these required water rates for the Lake Powell pipeline will reduce demand so that the water itself is completely unnecessary, even though CUP water rights will be heavily impacted. Excuse me. A separate analysis on the economics by a group of PhD economists at the University of Utah found that the water rates must increase 520% to repay the Lake Powell pipeline debt. The applicants are trying to avoid repaying Utah taxpayers for the cost of issuing bonds on the bond market to pay for the construction costs of this very exorbitant and expensive water. We do not agree with the applicant's claims of how much water Lake Powell pipeline will cost at the end of the day. We think that this water will cost at least $50,000 per acre foot, making it incredibly unaffordable. And what the purpose of review in the environmental review is to have this dissent and debate, which the applicant has stifled and prevented the public from having a chance to really offer meaningful input on. What's also disturbing and demonstrates that this application is not in the best interest of the public welfare is what's been happening over the last 12 years around facts and data that are, shall we say, inconvenient to the proponent's application. In the 2008 water needs assessment that the applicant prepared and submitted to FERC, the federal agency at the time that was regulating the project, the applicant noted there was about 161,000 acre feet of existing water inside the Virgin River and its tributaries. Over the last 12 years, subsequent filings by the applicant have worked to reduce that amount of water inexplicably from the system. We do not know why 63,000 acre feet has disappeared from the applicant's filing about the water supply inside the Virgin River. But the existing water supply of the Virgin River is central to the issue of whether this water right should be approved. The public welfare, the best interests of water delivery for the public welfare is obviously delivering the least expensive source of water. If the applicant was required to report to a regulatory body for the Public Services Commission, as other commodities do so, for example, electricity, natural gas, Rocky Mountain Power, Questar, or telecommunications firms, that regulatory body would say, before you do a rate increase, before you build a new project, we need to see that the project in question is the least expensive source of supply. The Lake Powell pipeline is the most extravagant and expensive available source of supply in the state of Utah. The idea that the applicant would go 140 miles away to build a multi-billion-dollar water project to deliver water to a community which the applicant notes is using 304 gallons per person per day borders on madness. The least expensive source of water is the water at their doorstep already in the Virgin River. The next least expensive source of water is through basic water conservation. The next least expensive source of water is through farmland conversions. If the community is going to be growing in population, it's going to be doing so, much of it on irrigated farmland, and that farmland water should be transferred to the new systems. None of these alternatives are considered in the environmental permitting because they are inconvenient for the applicant. And that inconvenient truth, it jeopardizes the public welfare. If the Utah taxpayer does not get repaid for the construction costs and the costs of issuing bonds for said construction, that is not in the public welfare. And the applicant has failed to demonstrate that that can happen. The applicant uses the 2019 study by the auditors to hang its hat on that repayment has been demonstrated, but that specifically demonstrates and raises major questions about the fact that the applicant seeks literally hundreds of millions of dollars in interest-free loans through the issuance of those bonds. That audit is clear in showing a table of that hundreds of millions of dollars of interest. Between 600 million and 1.2 billion dollars is what the applicant is seeking to have waived from its repayment obligations. That is not in the public welfare. That makes this water right application consideration premature. It is the public that gets to determine what's in the public welfare. And that's an ongoing dialogue that needs to happen. Finally, I know I have just 30 seconds, but to just add the last thing. In 2018, the applicant testified to Executive Water Finance and noted they do not intend to take all of the Lake Powell pipeline until the year 2054. That's a demonstration that the water isn't necessary for Washington County's future, is the fact that they don't even intend to take this water. This application should be rejected because it is premature. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. We are going to go ahead and take a 10-minute recess. So you'll notice the clock on the monitor says 2:29. If we could make sure everyone's back in their seat, we'll commence this at 2:40 and allow the AV guys to kind of do some test runs with the Google Meets interface. Thank you.
System check, system check. Check feed to YouTube. Confirm audio on YouTube. Stand by for video conference check. System check, system check. Tom, do you copy? Sound check to Tom.
Microphone.
Tom, if you could give us a sound check again.
Microphone check. Testing 1 2. Microphone check. Testing 1 2. This is a microphone check. Testing for the Google Meet.
Tom, we have good
Copy
Tom,
that.
we have good copy. Please stand by.
Standing by. Microphone testing 1 2. Microphone testing 1 2. This is Tom Thompson testing for the Google Meet electronic attendees. How copy?
Copy.
Thank you, Dave, for that confirmation. We can hear you loud and clear now. Apologies for that beginning, and we're getting this set up so we can get you in.
No worries. Thank you for dealing with technology. It's a pain in the backside.
Especially during these times. Thanks for being patient with us.
Okay, I see the time is 2:40. Why don't we go ahead and get in our seats, and then we'll commence the hearing. I understand we've got the Google Meets interface to hopefully cooperate with us. I also understand that my voice might be a little bit soft, so I'll try to speak up into the microphone so that those who are joining us online can hear us. Let's go ahead and proceed next to the next protestant on the roster, which is Eric Balkin, Glen Canyon Institute.
Yeah, this is Dave Wegner, and I'm stepping in for Eric. He's unavailable today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wegner. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. First off, I am here today representing the Glen Canyon Institute. I'm not going to go into great detail as Jane and Zach have pretty much laid the context with a lot of numbers and such, but I do want to focus on two issues that are important to your understanding of the issue in front of you, and that is the issue of the supply question and the issue of the process. A little bit of context and background. I'm a scientist engineer by training and profession. Began my career in lovely Duchesne, Utah, working on the Central Utah Project, helping to write the environmental impact statement for the Uinta and Upalco units. I have over 25 years of experience working for the Bureau. 14 of those was working at Lake Powell, at Glen Canyon Dam, and downstream in the Grand Canyon. I followed that up with being asked to be the staff director for the Water and Power Subcommittee for the Natural Resources Committee of the House of Representatives, where we dealt with basin-wide issues related to water and water supply in the western United States, 17 western states. And I was personally worked on Indian water settlements. Currently, I am a board member of the National Academy of Sciences Water Science Technology Board, where we're constantly reviewing and updating the new projections on hydrology, climate, weather, et cetera, across the country and especially the West. What I first want to speak to is the issue of the supply question. We are in the 21st year of a multi-year drought in the Colorado River Basin. That was made worse this year, I guess, by the flash drought that we've seen that basically resulted in no or very limited monsoon season across the Colorado River Basin. We saw the snowpack in the Colorado Rockies literally sublimate into the air between February and April, where we ended up having approximately 52% of what we anticipated in coming down in the water supply. This is part of a long-term trend that we're seeing, and the scientists and the science supports this. What's climate change going to do to the Colorado River? Well, there's 4 big areas that it's going to hit. One is we're going to see flow reductions due to higher temperatures. The science and the papers that have gone through peer review consistently support this. We're going to see a different runoff pattern than we've ever seen before. And that runoff pattern will not match what the historical effort looked like. We're going to see less snowpack in the mountains, where in 2018 we saw a significant decline, a 10% decline from April 1st forward. So the trends are we're going to see less water within the system. And as this happens, the precipitation is going to change. We're going to see more drastic, when we do have rain, it's going to be more drastic and certainly more intense. So this issue of climate change is one that needs to be taken into consideration on whether there is going to be adequate supply to address the issue. Jane Whalen has already identified in one of her slides that the allocations between the upper basin states is based on percentage. Doesn't matter if there's 15 million or if there's 1 million, it's still only going to get a percentage of that water. So the point is that we have to take into consideration the supply questions that are going to be facing the basin overall. That drives me to the second area of our concerns, and that is the process. Earlier in September this year, the other 6 basin states of the Colorado River Basin wrote a letter to Secretary Bernhardt requesting that the process that is currently ongoing with the NEPA compliance be suspended for a time until the basin states have a chance to come together to figure out the process and how the pieces fit together in terms of allocation for future water rights. As Zach mentioned, there's already several Indian water settlements that are going to take the top off of the available water supply due to the fact that Indian water right is a federal reserved water right that has higher priority. Currently today, of the 13 settlements that are in existence in the Colorado Basin, the tribes already have 20% of the paper water rights available. There's currently a piece of legislation for the Navajo settlement in Utah that will take another percentage off of that. So the point is that we need to take all of these elements into consideration. In January of 2021, the 7 basin states begin their renegotiation of the 2007 guidelines for the operations of the Colorado River Basin. These are going to be significant discussions because the states are going to have to come together to figure out how they're going to parcel out shortages that are going to continue to occur in the Colorado River Basin. This will directly affect the available water that will be supplied not only to Utah, but to the other basin states. My concern and that of the other 6 basin states is that the time is now to step back and make sure we have all the data and are making decisions, whether it's for allocation of water rights or allocations of the larger state percentage of water on the data, and let the science help guide that decision, and that it's premature right now. So in summary, there are 4 major conclusions that I would like to draw. First off, from the effort to date, there has been a lack of integration of the climate change projections for the Colorado River Basin included within the dialogue. Secondly, the allocations to the upper basin states are based on percentage. They're not based on a hard number. and recognizing that the percentage will continue to remain the same as part of the 48 compact, but that the amount of water available will be diminished. Thirdly, the releases from Lake Powell are driven, and Glen Canyon Dam are driven by the compact and the treaty requirements with Mexico. That is not going to change. And we do have a responsibility through the 1922 compact to make those deliveries. And fourth and last is the approval of the water right does not make sense until Washington County shows that it has done due diligence to look at other sources of water supply. Now, I think Zach mentioned that it's 304 gallons per person per day is the number that he put out there on use in Washington County. When you look downstream to what Las Vegas is today, based on the fact that they were facing the same sort of issue of a diminishment of water supply, it's significantly reduced. How did they do that? They did it through conservation, they did it through education, they did it through water efficiency. The same should be done to look at in Washington County to ensure that we've taken that first cut. That's the cheapest water out there. Secondly, they ought to look at water reuse and recycling. The Bureau of Reclamation Title 16 program, I just finished a review on this. That water is coming in at around $1,000 per acre foot, which is substantially less than what was testified to earlier in the day. And lastly, in terms of agricultural conversion, I'll be the last to say we ought to be converting ag land to municipal use. But in some cases, that is your next choice of cheapest water. Even if it's temporary fallowing of those waters, of those lands to get that water, it will help bridge the gap for what Washington County needs. The bottom line in conclusion is that in our estimation, this is a premature attempt to get the water right to further deplete the upper basin water and will ultimately impact the broader concerns for the Colorado River Basin. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking my testimony, and I stand ready if there are any questions.
Mr. Wegner, I just do have a follow-on question, and I think it's probably you and the previous protestants have highlighted the impact of climate change and the potential for those impacts on the Colorado River Basin. Can you tailor those comments specifically towards this application, recognizing that this is a change application on an existing application to appropriate that's already been approved? So the concept of water being diverted under the right has already been approved. We're looking now at these elements of change. Is there anything that you could specifically speak to those elements with regard to your concerns?
And thank you. That's a very good question, because the issue is specifically there's going to be less water in Lake Powell. And because there's going to be less water in Lake Powell, the other basin states all upper basin states are going to be cutting back, doing demand side management, implementing a variety of ways to try to increase the amount of water that's available in the state. And as related to specifically this water right, is that the point is there might not be as much water in Lake Powell available for diverting as we are being led to believe. That's the point.
So I guess my follow-on question to that is that the approved application, how would diverting it as it is currently authorized be different than how it is proposed to be authorized under this change? You mentioned a reduction in water to Lake Powell, but whether you divert that water out of the Green River or redivert it from Lake Powell, can you help me understand the distinction you're drawing there, please?
The distinction I'm trying to draw is there might not be the water available to divert even for the Green River beyond what's already occurring today. We need to look at the data.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wegner.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go ahead and proceed to the next protestant. Center for Biological Diversity. You want to, I see Mr. Wolf is attempting to speak. I think you need to unmute yourself, Mr. Wolf.
There, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. If you wouldn't mind making your appearance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. My name is Doug Wolf. I'm a senior attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm representing the center with regards to its protest in this proceeding. Mr. Jeff Apple, who is also participating in this hearing, he's doing it virtually, as am I, is my local counsel. Before I turn to my presentation, I'd like to make 3 observations based on the hearing so far. First, given that the hearing officer is giving the applicant 60 days to respond to the pre-hearing submittals, I assume the hearing officer has determined that the applicant's objection to the center's pre-hearing submittal is not well taken. I'll assume that's the case. Second, both Ms. Crowder and the gentleman from Stantec, I'm sorry, I don't have his name, relied on materials from the NEPA process during their presentations. Ms. Crowder explicitly asked the state engineer to use the NEPA process as a means to make the public welfare determination required under Utah law. Therefore, if the state engineer uses the outcome of the NEPA process to determine public welfare, and the applicant urges the use of the draft EIS analysis regarding economic feasibility and urges the hearing officer to consider that to be relevant, all the NEPA materials should be a part of the record of this proceeding. So on behalf of the center, I'm requesting that the hearing officer include all the NEPA materials, including all public comments, that they should become a part of the hearing record. If this material is not included in the record, I would ask that the hearing officer exclude it for the purpose of making any determination under 73-3-8. The third observation I would make goes to the question that the hearing officer just asked Mr. Wagner. Essentially, the hearing officer was, as I understand it, was asking Mr. Wagner to relate his concerns to the provisions of the Utah Water Code and the application regulations that the state engineer must contend with. In fact, I think there's an easy answer to that. The lack of water supply that all the protestants have been talking about goes to the question of physical feasibility, which is 73-3-8, 1A, little 3, little a. So I think that's directly relevant. Going to my presentation, there are 3 topics I'd like to address. Basically, I'm going to summarize the evidence that's already come in through the protests, through the pre-hearing submittals, and through the hearing today. So the first point I'd like to make is that the proposed transfer would not be physically feasible. Again, that goes to the hearing officer's question he just raised. Second, I'll summarize the evidence that the proposed transfer would not be economically feasible. That's already been raised. And third, I'll summarize the evidence that the proposed transfer would lead to impairment of existing water rights. So let's start with physical feasibility. There's evidence in the protests, in the presentations today, and in the 2 pre-hearing submittals that in the future, water on the Green and Colorado rivers will be less and less available. We've had a lot of discussion of that today. The evidence includes Bureau of Reclamation analyses, an expert report Ms. Whalen referred to that was presented by the Lake Powell Pipeline Coalition, and many academic papers that Zach referred to. The applicant depends on sufficient water with an appropriate priority being available at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Water owed to senior water rights and/or water owed to the lower basin or Mexico should be off limits. Presumably, the applicants would have to absorb the carriage loss from Flaming Gorge Reservoir to Lake Powell and through the pipeline to avoid enlargement of their right. Because in the future, the Green and Colorado rivers will have less and less water available, the evidence supports the conclusion that the supply of water via the Lake Powell pipeline would be unreliable, just as the applicant seeks to argue that the Virgin River is unreliable. The same studies that the draft EIS relies on to argue the Virgin River would be unreliable, in fact, also apply to the Colorado River. And it, as everyone, all the protestants have argued today, and as the protests and the pre-hearing submittals support, that would be unreliable. As such, the project should not be deemed physically feasible. Next, I'd like to address economic feasibility. There's evidence in the protests and the presentations today and the pre-hearing submittals that the applicants would not be able to pay for the pipeline. Zach touched on this in his testimony. Our understanding is the state would issue bonds to pay for the construction, but that the applicants would have to repay the state with interest, including the state's financing costs. We also understand that the applicant intends to raise water rates and impact fees to accomplish this repayment. You heard that from the gentleman from Washington County Water Conservation District. However, because the repayment obligation would be so large, if you add in repayment of the financing costs, the bond costs, plus interest, you get over $4 billion. Demand for the Lake Powell pipeline water, as a result, would decrease precipitously. This is the argument that Zach presented regarding the elasticity of demand, and that's something that is addressed in detail in Utah River Council's comments, which they submitted as part of their pre-hearing submittal, which I also submitted as part of our pre-hearing submittal. So you have an increase in rates, you're going to have a decrease in demand. Zach just made the argument that it would go down to the level of Las Vegas, 150 gallons per capita per day, at which point the Lake Powell pipeline water wouldn't be needed. And in fact, they wouldn't be able to finance it. So the evidence suggests this decrease in demand would cripple the applicant's ability to repay the state. Because the applicants are unlikely to be able to finance the project because they can't repay, it should not be deemed economically feasible. Finally, let's turn to impairment of existing rights. If the upper basin does not deliver 75 million acre feet over 10 years at Lee Ferry as required by the 1922 Colorado Compact, a compact call is likely. If the flow at Lee Ferry falls below combined flow obligations set out in Articles 3C and D, consumptive use in the upper basin must be curtailed to the degree necessary to offset any flow shortfall. Article 4 of the 1948 Upper Basin Compact sets out the procedures and requirements for curtailment of use by upper basin states when you have a compact call. Several parts of Article 4 are important. First, it requires the immediate repayment by states that have overconsumed prior to any additional curtailment of use in other states. Second, after repayment of overconsumption, apportionment of any necessary further curtailment is based on actual water use during the water year immediately preceding the compact call. So let's talk about repayment. This is repayment of overcompensation, not repayment of the bonds. In the event of a flow shortfall at Lee Ferry and a resulting need to curtail consumptive use among the upper basin states, if Utah has over the previous 10 years consumptively used more than 23% of the water determined to have been available for consumptive use in the upper basin, it would immediately have to curtail or deliver stored water until that amount has been offset. Now, Ms. Whalen talked about the potential that there has been overconsumption. She referred to the Deseret News article. The former state engineer quoted as saying that there's been an overallocation, at least on paper. Certainly there's a potential if there's a compact call that Utah would have used more than its 23%, at which point it would be vulnerable. If after repayment of all overconsumption, a shortfall still remains at Lee Ferry, Utah, along with the other upper basin states, would have to curtail their use or deliver stored water in proportion to their consumptive use in the previous year. And that would be the proportion that their total consumptive use in the previous year bears the overall shortage. So should curtailment of consumptive use in the state of Utah become necessary, the Utah Division of Water Resources would have the responsibility of curtailing use under Utah water law according to priority of appropriation date, subject to preferences in the event of a declared temporary water shortage emergency. So I think we talked about, I guess, originally maybe Mr. Bushwater talked about the priority date. It's 1958 for these rights. There are many other more senior rights in Utah. Obviously, there are more senior rights in the Upper Basin. Mr. Wegner just talked about the tribal rights, which are all senior. So the LPP would not fare well if there's a compact call and Utah has to curtail. As noted already, there's evidence in the protests and the presentations today and in the two pre-hearing submittals that the future water on the Green and Colorado rivers will be less and less available. Therefore, this evidence predicts that future shortfalls at Lee Ferry are likely. In fact, Mr. Harding, who Ms. Whalen referred to, he was the expert from Linker Technologies. He He has 40 years of working on water issues. He's very familiar with the compact. He, in his expert report, which is part of the pre-hearing submittal, said that there would be compact calls based on his analyses of Bureau of Rec projections, and that there'd be shortfalls, and that Utah would be likely to have to repay. So I think there's definitely support in the record for a conclusion that there will be future shortfalls. What this means is that Utah will have to go through the compact curtailment process I have described. Article 4 does protect present perfected rights, which aren't relevant here. However, other Utah water rights beyond the right that is the subject of this proceeding, not only the LPP rights, but other rights, including senior rights, could be curtailed, and that was Mr. Harding's prediction in his expert report. So on the basis of the evidence regarding decreased future water availability and the resulting curtailment process, the protestants conclude this application will impair existing rights. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Any questions from the panel? Okay, we will go ahead and proceed to the next protestant, Living Rivers and Colorado River Keepers. Are they present online?
Yes, sorry. This is John Weisside. I'm the conservation director for Living Rivers. In the interest of time, I have nothing else to say. I think what I would have said has already been covered, so I'll pass.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Weisside. We will move now to the next protestant, Marjorie McCloy. Is she present online? I don't see her in the room. Hearing nothing, we'll move on. Now we kind of transition into the public comment phase of this hearing, and I think I will reiterate that we probably just need to have a little bit of digital patience as we work through these, as people have public comments. What I would like, and there's obviously no public in the room here, would all be online. So I would ask, if you are a member of the public and not a party, and you have interest in providing some comments for this hearing, if I believe the Google Meet interface allows you to raise your hand or indicate it on that, and we'll see if we have any takers. And if I don't see any takers there, then I guess we will simply ask for someone to speak up, and then we'll go from there. And maybe if we can view the chat, to see if anyone there wants to indicate that they want to speak. All right, we have Paul Van Dam. Mr. Van Dam, you have 2 minutes to provide some comment.
Hello, this is actually Lisa Rutherford. I'm using Paul Van Dam's. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for letting me make this comment. I live in southern Utah. I get Washington County Water Conservancy District water, and I appreciate them for that. But I've tracked, studied, and written about the Lake Powell pipeline for 14 years to provide another side of the story to Washington County citizens, as opposed to that comes out of the water district. I appreciate all the comments that were made today, but I'd like to address a couple of things that Mr. Renstrom said. He said that the water district needs to provide an adequate supply of water. I would question that. I think that what's being proposed is an excessive supply of water. We're currently using over 300 gallons per capita per day. The DEIS indicated that the county and the state proposed to have us using 240 gallons per capita per day from 2040 to 2075. That is an outrageously high amount of usage compared to what other desert communities are doing right now. As far as providing water to protect the environment that Mr. Renstrom mentioned, Washington County has no problems taking water from the Virgin River during the irrigation season, but they want us to believe that that's a problem for using that water year-round. There's little, if any, talk about water storage in the off-irrigation season time to make better use of that water. He also mentioned the visitors and second homes, using that as an excuse for needing this water. Other desert communities that use far less water than we do also have high numbers of visitors and high numbers of second
Ms.
homes.
Rutherford, you've ran out of time. If you'd like to take 10 seconds and just summarize, please.
Yes, I would just like to say that the other basin states have complained about this, talking about potential lawsuit. And the Executive Water Finance Board has said this would be a $1 billion subsidy to our county by the entire state, taking money from education, transportation, other real needs for this fabricated need. And thank you for your time and for considering this. And I ask you to reject this change request.
Thank you, Ms. Rutherford. Your comments have been noted. Are there other public online that would like to participate in the public comment process? I'm not seeing any chat messages, nor am I hearing anyone chiming in. So we will go ahead and proceed back to the applicant. You have 30 minutes to sum up.
Thank you. And can you hear me? It's on. Yes, thank you. And if it would be okay, I'd like to reserve some time for Ms. Crowther to also sum up.
As long as it's within that
It'll be within
total
our
30 minutes.
Yes.
You got all the time you want, as long as
Okay,
it's 30
thank you.
minutes.
Let me start with just addressing some of the points that have been made and trying to bring some
Mr. Bushman,
clarity.
hold on. Hey, is there a way to pipe his microphone? We're having a hard time hearing in the back. All right, thank you.
In the context of the comments that have been made by protestants and others, one is, I think when you look at economic feasibility, physical feasibility, financial ability of the applicant, public welfare, there is one context this all has to be kept in mind with, and that is the fact that the Utah legislature has directed that this project be completed and that it will fund the project. Within that is an assessment of public welfare. It is the legislative body of the state that has determined that this project should go forward. You know, there has been some discussion about the availability of water. First of all, it's important to note is availability of the water in the source is not a statutory criteria to be considered in a change application. So the arguments have come in under the physical feasibility or economic feasibility. I find it odd that that would be an appropriate interpretation of statute where the legislature has specifically said in an application to appropriate, you do look at the availability of water in the source, but in a change application, you do not. And then to use a surrogate to try to come in and reach that very same issue that the legislature said wasn't necessary is use it under economic and physical feasibility. I think that's an incorrect interpretation of the statute. And
Would you disagree that the ability for the applicant to pay back the cost of the project doesn't tie into the economic feasibility of the project based on projected water availability?
Absolutely. I don't believe that has any bearing in this analysis. The legislature is going to fund it. I don't think it's the state engineer's office's responsibility to determine how wise the decisions of the legislature are and how it invests its money in projects and whether the debts could be repaid. We're looking at economic feasibility, physical feasibilities, whether the project can actually be accomplished. Again, the state is the one financing this and doing it. It will be accomplished, can be accomplished. Now, whether the state made a bad decision as to whether the county can actually pay it back or not, I don't believe that's an analysis that should be made in this application hearing. Another matter on this to talk about just a little bit is that water right 3479 is already an approved application. It is already within the budget and application. a budget of the Colorado River apportionment to Utah. And with regard to that apportionment, it's important to note that the Upper Basin Colorado, or the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact, allocates 23% of the Upper Basin's 7.5 million acre feet of water. So 23% of that, on at least on paper, is 1.725 million acre feet per year. Now, the Division of Water Resources has calculated and used a figure, what they call available supply, what they believe is actually available in the system. And that's based off a figure of 6 million acre feet and 23%. So that is the 1.38 million acre feet of water that's what's being considered as part of Utah's available supply under the Upper Colorado River Basin allocation. It's already factoring in drought, and obviously 1.5 million acre feet within the Upper Basin that has not been used, or it may not be available to be used. So the change application we have, this water is all within that available supply. The Upper Basin has never failed to deliver the 7.5 million acre feet over 10 years. So the 75 million acre feet over 10 years. Never once has it failed to deliver that amount of water. In fact, it delivers more. And that also includes the Upper Basin's share of what's due to Mexico of 750,000 acre feet. Those have always been met. The shortages in the system and the shortfalls in the system that we call structural deficits are largely due to the lower basin's overutilization of its water sources. In other words, it's using more than its apportionment, and the Upper Basin, with the water it hasn't been using, has been making that a little bit more feasible in the long run. But the reality is the Upper Basin has not developed its entire apportionment. It hasn't developed its available supply of its apportionment. And to somehow say that there's a more beneficial use of water, or talking about feasibility, is to simply allow that water to pass to the lower basin for its use, and to use it more, use to support its excess use. I would say that it is not Utah's responsibility to forego using its legal and rightful apportionment in the Colorado River in order to mitigate system shortfalls in the lower basin when other basin states are using their full apportionment and more. The legislature, to this effect, in this past legislative session, has made a couple of directives. One is in HRC 22, House Concurrent Resolution 22, and it says, "Be it resolved that the legislature of the state of Utah, the governor concurring therein, encourage the Division of Water Resources and the Division of Water Rights to expeditiously develop and place to beneficial use, wherever within the state the need may arise, the water apportioned to Utah under the Colorado River compacts, consistent with the law of the river." Similarly, the Water Resources Code was amended in Utah Code Section 73:1-21, subsection B, Roman numeral 14, which states Utah will promote the development and beneficial use of Utah's allocated share of interstate waters, including Utah's allocation under the 1922 and 1948 Colorado River compacts. So to the effect that Utah should disproportionately shoulder the burden of system shortfalls, the legislature has spoken to that as well, is that we are to use our allocation. And again, we are looking at what's available supply. We're not looking at our full 1.725 million acre feet due under the Upper Basin Compact, but an available supply figure that's been reduced. At least in some of the written submissions, there was a discussion and some comments about whether this project and its use of the water would harm public recreation or the natural stream environment. And in my opening presentation, I think we made clear, and I'll reiterate it again, is that this is part of an existing water right. This application is taking a portion of an existing water right application that's been approved. That water upon release from Flaming Gorge Reservoir will remain in the Green River and into the Colorado until it's diverted in Lake Powell. The project will have absolutely no effect on the flows of the Green River. In fact, it preserves those flows and helps preserve those flows for recreation for endangered fish. And I don't quite understand how somebody would say the project, unless they don't understand that fact, is how it would impact or hurt public recreation or endangered fish species. And just lastly, I'll just touch on financial ability of the applicant. Again, this is the state of Utah. I don't think there's any question as to whether this project could be funded by the state of Utah. Many have taken issue with it as to whether that's an advisable decision. But again, that was a decision of the legislature, and the project is fine. You know, the applicant has the financial ability to carry through with the project, and it is both economically and physically feasible. And I'll conclude with that. And
before we turn over to Ms. Crowther, Mr. Bushman, since you are the legal counsel for the Board of Water Resources, can you speak to some of the questions or concerns with regard to the utilization of upper basin allocation in the lower basin, and what type of implications that might have with regard to the other basins in the compact itself?
yes, I would. The other 6 basin states did write a letter asking the Secretary of Interior to delay the issuance of a final environmental impact statement and record of decision in this. The state, along with the Washington County Water Conservancy District, looked at that, looked at some of the other issues that were raised, possible weaknesses that were in the environmental impact statement, draft environmental impact statement, and made a decision to go ahead and ask Reclamation to do a more evaluation, and that we do a supplemental EIS and deal with these issues. In the process, we have been meeting, the state has been meeting with the other basin states to talk about these issues. We have been assured by those states that they are confident we can work through all of the legal issues, big river issues, in those meetings, and we anticipate doing that. As for legal arguments or claims that upper basin water within a state, so in this instance, Utah's upper basin allocation cannot be used in the lower basin portion of the state. And what I would refer to on that is maybe the simplest explanation is Article 15 in the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact, which states, the provisions of this compact shall not apply to or interfere with the right or power of any signatory state to regulate within its boundaries the appropriation, use, and control of water, the consumptive use of which is apportioned and available in such state by this compact. And that's, for me, is a very clear statement of the intent of the parties, is that it may be one thing for one state to transfer its upper basin apportionment to another state in the lower basin and give that, but for the state to use within its own boundaries, its water, that Article 15 in the compact makes very clear that nothing in that compact was intended to alter or interfere with the state's ability to do that. Now, again, we are working with the other basin states to work through all of these issues and others, and do fully anticipate, based on their representations, that we will reach agreement on moving forward with the project. But I do not believe this would be any reason for the state engineer to not approve this application and move forward with it.
Thank you. Ms. Crowther.
Thank you. Thank you. Start with the housekeeping issue. I have consulted with my co-counsel on this regarding the additional 60 days that you had offered us to supplement the record. While we appreciate that offer, we believe that we have covered all of the issues that we need to in our written material and at hearing, and we are willing to waive that additional 60 days and have the record closed today.
So noted.
Thank you. Okay. Again, I'm kind of going to go through a couple of points that were raised by the protestants and then finish up with my conclusion on that. One point that is just fundamentally incorrect that I want to make sure was corrected on the record and does not
continue to show up slides. There was a reference by the Conserve Southwest Utah that the state of Utah was buying water from the Colorado system for this project, and that is not the case. Like I say, this is Utah's compact allocation water that Utah has an existing right to use, and we are not buying any water for this project. Several of the protestants had talked about the fact that this application may be premature, or it may be premature for the state engineer to rule on this application at this time. But there is no legal requirement that a project be fully permitted before seeking approval of a change application for the project. The state engineer's decision on this application is not going to supersede or circumvent any of the additional project approvals that are required for this, which the applicants are continuing to pursue. There is no reason that in the scope of all of the types of permits we need to get for this project, we can't seek the change application approval at this juncture. And there's absolutely no basis for the state engineer to hold on this pending other permits, which of course we know we will have to receive and will do so as we move forward on the project. There was a statement by the Center for Biological Diversity that we were relying on NEPA findings or analysis in this case. That's kind of a fine legal distinction on this that I do want to just touch upon. We are not actually asking the state engineer to make its determination based on the NEPA findings. What Hill, Utah actually says is that the fact that the project must undergo significant other reviews and permits, particularly types of reviews that have a goal of protecting the public interest and the environmental interest, can be reason to believe that the project will not be detrimental to the public welfare. That being said, I would also note that all of the NEPA materials are of public record, do not necessarily need to be transferred into this record. One point that's not exactly within the statute, but I do want to touch upon. There was a lot of discussion about water consumption in Washington County Water Conservancy, and at least the inference that Washington County Water Conservancy District was not taking appropriate conservation measures. Washington County Water Conservancy District is actually very active in conservation. It pursues conservation as a primary goal. And in fact, it was the first county in the state to meet the statewide conservation goals. The district will continue to practice responsible water management going forward on this. One other just point, again, I want to point out is that when we talk about the compact states, we need to remember that the compact states entered into that compact on a co-equal priority basis. The lower basin states, or even the other upper basin states, do not have a priority water rate over the water rate that we're looking at here. Finally, in conclusion, I want to bring this back to the change application and the statutory criteria for approval on that. We have shown that we've met the statutory criteria, that there is reason to believe that the relevant criteria have been met, and it is therefore the duty of the state engineer to approve the application. We have shown that the proposed use will not impair existing rights or interfere with the more beneficial use of water. As noted previously, the protestants have not identified a single right that will be impaired by this application or a more beneficial use that may be subject to interference. I think it is significant to note that there is not a single party with an existing right on the Green River or the Colorado River that has protested this application. Most importantly, they have not provided any evidence that the proposed change will cause an impairment to the system. This is an existing water right. There is already an application to appropriate that has been approved. And the change itself, what we are asking the state engineer to review and approve today, is not going to create a new impairment, and they have not provided any information that it will. The applicants have shown that the proposed plan to place a portion of Utah's Colorado River compact allocation water to beneficial use is physically and economically feasible, and that these applicants do have the financial ability to complete the project. The proposed use is a significant public water supply project. It is planned for the benefit of the citizens of Utah. Again, the protestants have not shown any reason to believe that the application will prove detrimental to the public welfare. On the contrary, we've shown reason to believe that it will actually benefit the public welfare. Mr. Bushman provided significant testimony about the benefits that may come from this project to the public. In fact, it is the statutory duty of both the Board of Water Resources and the districts to plan for and secure water for the future development of the citizens. That is exactly what this project is planned for and what this change application is filed to support. Finally, this project is critical to secure a reliable water supply for the fast-growing southern Utah region. And for the reasons shown, this application should be approved. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the panel? Okay, we appreciate everyone's input to this process. One thing I think would be helpful, we noted the applicant's waiving of the 60-day additional time frame. With that in mind, we acknowledge that and consider it waived. However, there are a couple of elements that I think would information requirements that would be helpful to the state engineer in the determination of that of this application and its statutory considerations. There was discussion of an agreement between Central Utah Project and the Board of Water Resources with regard to some type of agreement for priority reduction. Is that something that the applicant would be able to share with the state engineer?
Actually, Mr. Bingham, that is on record under the water rate file and has
Okay.
been since 2011.
Thank you. And then there was also discussion of the economic feasibility audit by the 2019 legislature. Is that a part of the file, or is that something the applicant could provide to the state engineer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. With that being said, we appreciate everyone's participation. We'll take all the information we received under advisement, and the state engineer will take that into consideration as she develops her decision. We don't make a decision at this time, but it'll be forthcoming in the future. Thank you very much. This concludes the hearing. Okay, too heated.